I'm a
Yes,
therapist, so
yes.
I'm always curious.
All right. Welcome back to the podcast. As I don't know if you can tell from my voice, I'm actually smiling because I'm so excited to have this person on the show. Not only because it's the first time ever I'm having a guest from that country. So you know how I'm so big on culture and just cultural explorations, and how much more if it's a wonderful guest from the very heart of Africa. Ooh. So let's just first kick off with a few fascinating facts about this nation. Let's see if you can guess it. So for all of my culture sleuths out there, let's see if you can get this country. It's referred as the warm heart of Africa. It has stunning lakes, very rich cultural heritage. It's called the land of giants because of the mountains there. They have a diverse wildlife, and allegedly they don't have a lot of snakes on the island, in the country. Have you guessed the country yet? I'll hold off a little bit while I read their bio, and let's see if you're able to get it. So, she grew up in the country's capital of Lilongwe alongside her 7 siblings. She attended a local primary and secondary school before pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Humanities at the university there sometime in 1999. Upon graduation, she engaged in research and eventually joined the university as an associate lecturer in psychology. This woman is very loaded, y'all. She furthered her education with an MSc in clinical psychology from Bangor University in the UK and a PhD in psychology from Rhodes University, supported by the Beit Trust Scholarship. She specializes in global mental health, providing psychosocial support to human rights activists, organizations aiding gender-based violence survivors, and international organization staff in high-risk settings. Her approach focuses on preventive mental health. She also offers psychoeducational workshops and therapeutic groups. She primarily employs CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, in her counseling, but also integrates some person-centered approaches, like motivational interviewing and mindfulness practices. She emphasizes the importance of individuals recognizing and nurturing their inner resources, promoting self-awareness, and building resilience. She's worked, with a lot of national commission in her country. She ensures ethical research practices in national studies and research protocols. We call it IRB here in the Institutional Review Board. She has research topics such as HIV and mental health, rural mental health, adolescent mental health. As a chartered psychologist affiliated with the British Psychology Society and a registered clinical psychologist, she is dedicated to enhancing mental well-being and ethical research standards. Everyone, please join me in welcoming from the wonderful country of Malawi, Dr. Mathero Nhkalamba.
Oh my gosh, Mo, that is so warm. Thank you so much. And when you said that I studied for my bachelor's in 1999, I suddenly felt very old.
It's okay. I was just right behind you. My friend turned 50 not too long ago, and I paused and I said, oh my God, I have a friend who just turned 50. I remember when I was younger, 50 felt like dinosaur age. But 50 is just like, that's a young age. And I'm like, oh my God, where did the years go? So it's humbling.
Yes, I mean, you are proud of yourself that, I've managed to do all this. But then you remind yourself that it's because I am older. So, yeah.
The fact that 50 doesn't even seem so old, I'm like, oh, that's like the prime of life. Like, I'm like, what would the younger Mo think? Anyways, it's such an honor to have you on the podcast, right? And I got your email out of the blue telling me you not only do you listen to the podcast, but you would love to come on the show. And that meant a lot to me because I know that living that sacred space of listener to wanting to engage, you probably saw something about the podcast. So I thank you for that. And that was why our response was just like, yes, let's bring her on. So thank you so much. And but I'm curious to know what motivated you to reach out, and especially wanting to have engage in these meaningful conversations.
To be honest, I'm honored to be here. You've created such a warm, welcoming space. When I listened to your podcast the first time, and because of the work that I do, I thought this is therapy on its own, because all the topics you've done, everyone can find something that they can relate to. And what really inspired me was your courage to talk about your own journey. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this. So it was a personal reason as well, because I'm not one of those people who's comfortable talking about myself. As a therapist, I'm a listener. And my personality, I'm an introvert. So it's very uncommon for me to talk about myself, to move out of my comfort zone. So I said, you know what, for my personal growth, can I try this? I really debated. And then I said, okay, I will feel vulnerable, but I think it'll be more empowering for me. There's, a certain power that you feel when you share, when you're vulnerable, because you no longer have to look invincible, It's like you can relate to others in a very authentic way. You can connect with others in a very authentic way because you're showing, parts of yourself that you have accepted, that you're not afraid, to show. So yeah, it's also really a personal thing for me. I've never done this before as a therapist. I'm a listener. So yeah, this is something for me, really. It's a new thing.
Thank you. And again, what an honor to hear therapists say they find our podcast therapeutic, and I look forward to exploring your story. And as someone who's not new to therapy and talking to a therapist, I think it's also nice to have your perspective on the podcast, and hopefully our listeners will find some utility similarly to how you found utility and how the podcast has also helped me in my own personal growth. So thank you for that. So let's start with the foundational questions. Lilongwe, Malawi. 7 siblings. Okay, tell us. Okay, as you know, I'm Nigerian, and I have a lot of questions about that for you. But let's start with just for those that are not even familiar with Malawi, because I feel like you guys are very, very quiet.
Yeah.
Relative to the loud mouths that Nigerians are, and I'm Nigerian, I'm allowed to say that, right? You're very quiet, but you move in strong spaces. I kind of allude you guys to be like Zambians. Just doing their thing, peaceful. Not that Nigerians are not peaceful, but we have a different energy. But for those that are not even familiar with your country, what was it like growing up with 7 siblings? Just paint the picture of Malawi for us.
Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right about Malawi. We're very calm, very friendly people. I think we have some sort of quite strength, very resilient, because it's always been a poor country for quite a long time. A lot of challenges, and but still we find something to laugh about every day. We're very communal, a lot of community support, and luckily it's a peaceful country. Nice food, because I'm a foodist. Nice food, a beautiful environment. At the same time, it's a place that gives me so much hope because it has a lot of potential. And yeah, despite all the challenges that we face, that there's a lot of things that we can tap from, that we have a future. We have people who are hardworking. We have people who love the country. So yeah, somehow we move on. But it is a challenging country in that sense that we have a lot of, poverty. So you said, how was it like growing up in a family of 7? More, it was like you're living in a boarding school. I'm the last born. I'm the baby of the family. So my mom was a primary school teacher, and my father worked for the Malawi police force, and 6 girls and 2 brothers. So I can tell you, the family was not short of jokes. You would actually be the butt of a joke at least once a week. So you couldn't be too serious. And these were...
And those things will hurt the most because your siblings know exactly where to get you. Oh, look at that one. Look at that one. The way he's working.
I mean, you could find all sorts of things in your shoes. You could find stones in your shoes. And I remember one day, I was being rude to my sisters. When you're the last born, you were asked to do all sorts of things as if you can't get tired. So I was rude. And then when I went to bed, my sister was like, oh, okay, you have a partner on your bed. You have someone to sleep with on your bed. And I'm looking at my bed. I'm seeing no one. And then I open my covers. There's a praying mantis. And my sisters knew how I hated those things. I stood there humbled I was put in my place. And they gave me a lecture on how not to be rude when adults are asking you to do things. And like, so, you have those sort of experiences when you grow up in a big family. And I think that's what really prepared me, because I've always been one of those people who's resilient. Criticism to me is feedback. It's not a personal attack, because in our family, there were sort of like brutal truths thrown around. I mean, with 6 girls, if you put on an outfit, you'd have one of your sisters saying, you know what? You look like a mushroom in that outfit. So I got used to that. And so as an adult, I've never felt a lot of peer pressure or, the pressure to conform. I think because I always felt I had a strong grounding. My sisters were practically my friends. They're practically my friends. So I'm very grateful for that, that I grew up in a family with, a lot of sisters and 2 brothers. And I was protected, very protective sisters and my 2 brothers. So I think that also, gave me that feeling of security earlier on.
That's thanks a lot for painting that. And I know your country has gone through a lot, the historical challenges, but that remarkable resilience is definitely rooted in community bonds, cultural values that we see that is reminiscent in so many African countries. And even when we move to the West, we still strive to almost like recreate that, even though sometimes it's so discordant with the environment we are in. I feel like here in the US, I always seek depth in my relationship, which I don't always get. And there's always that vacuum of trying to connect and build community, like know your neighbors and really know your neighbors, being able to walk in and not like working on them doing stuff, but just, that communal living, but definitely I'd see how that trickles down to even you as an individual, your enduring spirit, and then definitely your siblings. Oh, you grew up a lot. And last borns are quite unique. Some might say they are spoiled, but they grow up so fast because you get all the wisdom, distilled down. You're like an old soul. Also, yeah, it's a lot of responsibilities being the last born. Which I'm known, by the way. I'm the first one.
Oh my gosh.
I understand your hustle. Is what I'm trying to say.
No, firstborns have a lot of responsibility. You literally raise your other siblings.
Well, like second parents, yeah. That's it. I'm still raising, by the way. I'm still raising. But, you're just thrown in that helm of leadership from the get-go. But it's a position that I wouldn't trade for any other thing. So you're highly decorated. My goodness. BSc, MSc, PhD, and then all the things you do. Can you just walk us through your educational path?
You know what? When you say that, it's amazing because I was never an A student. Can you believe that? I was an average student, not very good, but not bad. And the reason being, I loved to read everything. So I couldn't engage with the curriculum. I would always read outside. I would have, novels on me. I would have magazines on me, just everything else but the curriculum. So I would usually engage with the curriculum during the exam time. So my grades weren't that great. So yeah, I went to local schools. Like I mentioned, my mom was a primary school teacher. And then I also went to a local secondary school. I actually had to repeat my Form 4 because I didn't do well because of what I just mentioned, that I was just reading everything else but what was supposed to be in the curriculum. But then when I got to uni, when I got selected for my Bachelor of Arts Humanities, I actually studied philosophy, loved philosophy, and I thought I would be a bioethicist because I loved ethics. So I think towards my fourth year, that's when I developed a really strong interest in psychology. And then that's when I said, okay, psychology is great. I mean, I can't just think and get paid, because I was also thinking of what job will I do with philosophy. So I did psychology and then got employed as a staff associate at that point. And I think, you have those serendipity moments where you just come across something. Okay, this is what I can do. There was a lecturer who came, a visiting lecturer, who taught us a module in clinical psychology and counseling, and that sparked my interest. And after my BA, I did a number of research projects and then got my scholarship the Beit Trust Scholarship, which was like a big deal. I remember when I got that scholarship, people were like, "Oh my gosh, how did you get it?" I was like, "Oh, I know the people who give the scholarships, but not really." But my my saving grace was that they saw that I was well-rounded. I wasn't just academic, because my reading around gave me, sort of like a broader picture, a broader perspective on how I saw things. So I remember in the interview, they were really impressed by that. So I went to the UK, Bangor University, very miserable place, small, always raining,
Oh, really?
always grey. Yes. And I had, what do they call it? Seasonal affective depression the
Sad.
first year.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and interestingly, I didn't like the place, but the school was a top school. I made very good friends. So after that, I came back and thought it would be smart to do a PhD right after my master's. So I went back to Bangor University in 2008 to start my PhD under the Commonwealth Scholarship. So when I was there, everything just fell apart. So I had challenges with my supervisor, which was, I think I was not very ready, and I didn't have a passion for the research that I was doing. And for the first time, I said, you know what? I am struggling here. I was struggling with my mental health. It wasn't the point where I was rock bottom, but I saw that if it kept on going like that, I would deteriorate. So it was the isolation, it was the lack of support, just feeling a lack of motivation. So I withdrew from that PhD. And then I came back to Malawi, I came back home and, regrouped. And then that's when I got my renewed passion to start this journey that I am on.
Wow. And I guess kudos to you for, kudos to you for speaking up for yourself and realizing that, okay, though I got my master's degree from here, the PhD wasn't what I thought it was, and then taking yourself from that situation. And I imagine it wasn't quite an easy decision to make, but, here you are and you've gone through that and you're still able to thrive. So thanks for reminding us that it's okay when things don't feel okay. Like what a dream started out to be, if it's no longer serving that purpose of, you go through the rigors of grad school or whatever you're doing, but at the point where you feel like this is not tolerable anymore, it's okay to just, do something else. I don't think we spend a lot of time talking about how quitting can be good for you.
Exactly.
I've had to talk to some people like saying, you should leave that job, even though it's paying some bills, but look at just how you're behaving, like look at how it's affecting you.
Exactly.
You're not yourself. There should be more to life. Not that every time you do your job you should be super, super excited, but if it's not a healthy environment, you don't have the support, you're driving to work and you're having palpitations, your blood pressure is high, you're having anxiety, you're popping 2 pills, what's the point of just trying to be at a job?
I got comfortable with saying I have failed. It's such a liberating word. And I have never been afraid of failing, because I've realized that that's not the worst thing to happen. So even when I'm applying for roles, even when I was emailing you, I was like, if I get a no, that's okay. It's not the worst thing that was going to happen. So you get really bold to say it's okay to fail. So I think that was a huge learning experience, also just about, prioritizing myself, being honest with myself, doing things for myself, because as you would imagine, there was, I would automatically think, okay, so how is this going to look like? But then I said, wait a minute. This is about you. It's about your well-being. It's about your happiness. And a PhD is a lifelong investment. You have to do something that you're really, really passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about the work you do. You've done a lot in psychosocial support for human rights, and you've also worked with survivors of gender-based violence. Now, tell me a little bit about Malawi. Was there something in your country that inspired that line of work? And I would like to imagine, like, similar with a lot of African countries, there's still a lot to be done. I mean, we've done a lot, but there's still a lot to be done in making sure that women's rights are upheld. But I'm just curious to know why those were pivotal areas of your career that you focused on.
Yeah, you are absolutely right about Malawi and most African countries that the mental health care is poor to non-existent. So in Malawi, you have the mental hospitals or the psychiatric hospitals that they're giving out drugs. And then on the other end, you have the teaching institutions, the academia. There is almost nothing in between where you can get counseling or a therapist who is qualified, because I am essentially working in the academia as a lecturer and I do my psychosocial support work. So you can imagine how that looks like. And I've just talked about all these psychosocial problems. You know, my first research was with orphans, and these were communities that were ravaged by HIV. So when I worked there, you know, all they simply needed was a space to talk. So the research that we were doing then gave them a forum just to talk about their feelings, their emotions, just to be validated, just to be listened to. So if you can't have that space, that means you can't process your emotions, the trauma. And with trauma, as you may know, you pass it on. You know, it's generational trauma. You pass it on to You have to resolve this thing. So that I say this is a need. In fact, in my PhD, that's what I focused on, working with women living with HIV and the intersectional issues that they have, because the gender-based violence wasn't there, the poverty, the, you know, single motherhood. So I would say there is a need, like a very, very high need to create these spaces. And I was trained in the West because I was trained in the UK, and I don't usually copy and paste, because what mental health and healing should look like for African countries, for cultures, should be different. So for me, it could be just sitting under a tree and chatting with women. That's how my research worked, because when I was starting my research, they gave us a room at the hospital. And these women said, you know what, we don't feel like being in that room because we don't want people to think that we're sick or we have problems with our mind and the like. So I said, okay, let's sit under a tree. And you know what? It was just like two women chatting. But there was a lot of healing that happened there, a lot of, you know, catharsis, a lot of processing that happened there. So I'm really fascinated by that. And I've also had healing conversations while buying tomatoes in a market, you know, or while if you're at a hospital, you're online, at the bank, because our culture in Malawi, everyone talks to everyone. You know, you can literally start a conversation with a stranger anywhere, like you're in a minivan. You can start a conversation, you can connect, you can relate, you can express yourself. So the people are that friendly. And that's, to me, what healing is like for us.
Wow, that's quite wonderful, especially trying to adopt your practice, because I imagine, like, similar with Nigeria, where mental health is seen like, oh, there's something wrong with you then if you have mental health issues, but you found a way to make them comfortable while at the same time providing that much needed support. Now, you alluded to something earlier on about not being trained in the West and coming back. I have quite a number of questions about that. One would be, let's start with the first two ones. One would be, what motivated you to go back home? Because it probably would have been more lucrative, and I use that word carefully, to stay in the West, given that you had the structure in place, you know, you were taught, educated, and your practice would have, you know, almost like being very easier to implement while you were there.
Yeah. And
then going back home where, again, Malawi, like many African countries, the economic development is a little bit slower.
Absolutely.
And cost of living and just the quality of living as well. And then how do you make sure that your practice is still grounded in a cultural way, and even having them buy into it? Because you're probably one of the very few people doing what you do, and some might not even see merit in that. And if you're trying to adopt it in a very large scale, are you well supported by the entities, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level? So those are like 2-in-1 questions, and I apologize for that.
3-in-1. First of all, what motivated me? What motivated me to come back to Malawi?
I wasn't sure the third one was going to shine through. I was like, yeah, let's just slip it in.
The simple answer to the first one is the weather. Like I said,
you mentioned that. Yeah.
UK weather is quite special. So I love my son. So I said I'm going back to Malawi. But yes, there is a high need in Malawi for these services. And I said, I don't know, financially or professionally, I could grow quicker here. But I am more needed in Malawi. And I also wanted to give back to my country. Like I mentioned, it has a lot of potential. So why not work in Malawi? I should admit it's very difficult to set up a formal practice because a lot of people who need these services are also going through other socioeconomic issues, and they cannot necessarily afford, if you do it privately. So that would mean I have to give my time voluntarily. I actually did volunteer for an adolescent clinic for some time because I thought, well, they need the services and there's no special tailored service for these adolescents living with HIV. So I have done a lot of volunteer work. But mostly, I think I would like to think so, that because I'm an educator, I have trained a lot of psychologists. I've tried to inspire my own students to do more with psychology when they go out to work. And the way it is, it's usually embedded in other programs. It's like a small component. So if you have like social cash transfer programs, there'll be a component in psychosocial support. If you have sexual reproductive health services, there'll be a component, but it is rarely looked at as a standalone program. I think for obvious reasons, because the focus is on physical health problems, which are more visible, which get more attention, which get more funding. So it's, I think there's a need for a lot of advocacy, a lot of emphasis about the importance of mental health, and just to get the resources together. Have I missed one of your questions? Because
No. I think one would be, since you are probably one of the it's like the way I could just imagine it is, what you're doing is quite novel. Are you, and if you're one of the first set to enter market, there's so much growing pains, but I hope that you've been well supported at, from policy levels, like your government is seeing value in what you do and all that.
I've been encouraged, I think, to use that word, and not because they don't see the need, but because the focus is on, the more pressing issues. Maybe you're talking of, like I said, maternal health. When people actually see that there are women struggling in hospitals, it gives them, the need to, to act. But mental health issues are not visible. That's the thing. Without mental health literacy, there's not going to be a fair appreciation of the importance of mental health. If you see someone struggling with tuberculosis, it's quite obvious that they need help. So that's what I would say, that it's a lack of appreciation because mental health issues really need to be advocated for. You really need to talk about them. You need that space to emphasize the importance of mental health.
Yeah. And I think, again, when we think about boardings, and you've kind of alluded to this. So I know for Malawi, it's one of the countries heavily affected by HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. And then we're also seeing a spate of non-communicable diseases like cancers,
Yes.
And so if you imagine just how health as a whole resource spending on health in our African countries, the budget spent on health is very minimal. And that would go into things like HIV, into cancer, into malaria.
Yeah.
And then what's left for mental health is like, we don't have anything. So definitely there's a long way to go. But I appreciate you just, talking about how we've been able to adapt and being adaptive. Because I think that sometimes when we get trained in the West, it's quite difficult to switch in a way because we're used to a certain form of luxury as far as in our practice. But to survive, you have to be adaptable. And I think that's what you're sharing with us today. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. I mean, the structures are there in the West. You're talking of every hospital having a unit for mental health. For years, the resources are there. They pay attention. So if you come with that model to Africa, to Malawi, people would just look at you and say, are you serious? Yeah. So it's really utilizing our own cultural healing methods. As I mentioned, women love to chat under a tree, or you can start up a conversation, or just community support, being engaged in social connections to boost our mental health, just our own ways. And with the hope that as we go on, we'll formalize this.
Agreed. So let's talk about women in Malawi, and because I'm very curious to learn more about what your country is like. So, and I can paint a picture of Nigerian women. Of course, these are generalizations as a way to make the contain our conversation. Not that every woman in Nigeria is like this, but there's this thing about being a strong Nigerian woman, right? We currently have a campaign going on. We call it the Hopeful 35. It's our way of raising funds to support women through fertility issues, and 35 and above, because that's that age where if you get pregnant, you're deemed geriatric pregnancy, and we're soliciting for not just donations but time. So if you're very much interested, we're taking psychosocial support as well. So a friend came on the podcast a few weeks back, and she, during our discussion, I call her an endometrious warrior, by the way, she mentioned she needed to be strong. She was actually at work having a crisis that ultimately ended with her having to rush to the emergency through an ambulance. And she almost didn't want to, because her co-worker saw her just looking like she was about passing out, and she almost didn't want to say, I'm not okay. But she eventually blurted it out, and it was so bad she had to be carted out of that place, in an ambulance. And that's quite an extreme example. But I know even if, as a person, personally for me, there's always just this thing about not being vulnerable. My spouse was on the podcast a while ago, and he told me that it was the very first time we had a pregnancy loss recently, and I broke down. And he told me that was the first time he had seen me be very vulnerable. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I think I'm vulnerable, especially with my girlfriends. But it was like, no, that was the first time he saw me really, really express. Yeah. And I'm like, So what exactly is this thing about being strong as an African woman? And Malawian women like that as well?
Yes.
Thank you, by the way.
And, okay, I'll start off by painting this picture. It's a stereotype. And this is how we've been depicted, all right? So if you look even at the global reports, the UNDP, UNFPA, you see a woman smiling with a baby on her back, 2 kids,
and then water on her head.
And water bucket on her head. She's even crunching, some vegetables. She even have a stick in the other hand. If she saw a snake, she would strike it. You know what?
And she can fly.
She can fly. I'll tell you this more. I go for walks in the morning. Where I live, it's there's a forest, and it's mountainous. So I go uphill for 40 minutes. I'm done. So I meet these women who are looking for firewood for energy to cook. Okay, and they walk at least 2 hours up the hill, 2 hours down the hill, and they come back with these big logs of firewood. When I do 45 minutes, I'm done. So one morning I take a picture. and I showed it to one of my colleagues who I work with internationally. And I was saying that, well, there's a lot of deforestation happening in Malawi, but, look at these women, they walk, these long distances. The first thing they said was, oh my gosh, she is very strong. And I'm thinking, this is not strength. This is desperation. This is poverty. No one wants to walk for miles with firewood on their head almost every day. So you see what I mean? So it's just starting from there, that you're not supposed to be weak. You're supposed to be very strong. You're not supposed to acknowledge that you can get tired. And mentally, the emotional part, what you just said, that at that moment you said, can I just express how I feel? We're not allowed to do that. You're supposed to suppress your emotions. You're not supposed to complain. You're supposed to take things stoically, almost take things lying down, which I call being a doormat. You're actually told to ignore your own emotions. All right. If you're feeling tired, you're feeling exhausted, if you're not feeling good, you're not supposed to talk about it. So it's a stereotype that is absolutely damaging. And more, there's also the pressure to succeed, which I didn't yield to when I withdrew from my PhD. All right, because I would get comments like, oh, Michelle, you are so focused. You secured the Beit Trust Scholarship. You secured this scholarship. Come on, forge on. Don't give up. And I'm like, wait a minute. I am suffering here. And I'm not going to carry this as a badge of honor. I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for being stressed. So it takes you to say, I'm not yielding to this pressure to succeed. And in addition to that, you're not only supposed to be good at your career, you're supposed to bear the 5 kids that we're expected to bear, 3 boys and 2
4
girls.
Boys. Sorry. 2
Eh? You can't bear girls only, eh? They have to be.
No, it cannot be.
Eh? At the same time.
What are they useful for? No.
At the same time,
all boys, strong boys.
I'm telling you, you're supposed to be a good cook. Those houses, when you get in, they bring you a dish and you're like, is this a rainbow? They've arranged the fruits in a geometric fashion, So you're like, oh, okay, I'm also
These
supposed
are sad
to be
stuff, even though we're laughing. These are really sad stuff.
At the same time, you're supposed to plan a wedding for your cousin in a weekend. That should go to military precision,
And take care of your in-laws as well. You forgot to mention that.
So you're supposed to be
devoted to them 100%. Yeah.
Yes, be respectful to them, although they're walking all over you. So you're supposed to be all these things. All this pressure. It makes you feel the stress, the anxiety, because you're not a superwoman. You're a human being, and it's just what I was also talking about, that there's no mental health support. There's no support where you can say, I am actually stressed. I am burning out. I need some help. I need to talk to someone. So it's really a stereotype that is very damaging. It stigmatizes strong, I'm doing air quotes, strong African Black women to seek help. It stigmatizes people to express exactly how they feel. And you literally just suffer in silence. You're not being a good model to your children because they are seeing that, it's okay to not be okay and keep on going. So what is that doing to your health? Because stress directly affects our bodies. Trauma is stored in our body. And even what you're talking about, the fertility issues, we've got menopause issues, cancers, all these things are exacerbated by these stresses that are not expressed.
Yeah. Wow. So I feel like there's a lot of strength in me, and thank you for painting that. It's so heart-wrenching in a way to just see how women will just not be able to seek help because you're supposed to be this strong and unbending. And I feel like there's still an opportunity in that crisis, Because as women, we're quite a powerful bunch. And I want to draw an example, even though it might not be the best of examples. So in Syria alone, as you know, they have one of the high rates of female genital mutilation. And they have this Bondo society, which is it's made up of women. And they are the ones like championing this and the level of, because they have stages of FGM. I'm not an expert, but I know there's one that is like almost like a total obliteration of the labia majora.
Oh my gosh.
And then they sew everything all the way to the top, and they leave just a tiny hole, a tiny hole for you to pee. And it's such a thing of pride for your husband to be the one to cut through it like an unsealed condom wrapper. But women are the one in strong of that, championing that campaign, and it's a thing of pride to have a child being cut through that. I know that. I think that to save ourselves as women, we need to speak up. The times I felt very liberated as someone in my profession, when I look at women who have gone ahead of me, and they seem to balance it all. But when you get into meetings with them and vulnerable moments, they will tell you, no, it's a struggle. My child, one told me that one of my mentors who I really, really respect, she shared with me that her child told her one day, Mom, I'm going to send you a calendar invite so that way we can have lunch together. Her daughter was going to have to put herself on her mom's calendar to be able to have lunch with her, because mom is never around. She talked about just the sacrifices she had to make for her career, and these some of the things that she had to pay for, as it were. And I think that deliberation again will have to come from women, especially when we talk about our stories. Because when we see people just being out there and doing things, we don't know the sacrifice they've had to make. If we start having those balanced conversations, I think a lot of us will be empowered to come out of the shadows to say, hey, you know what? It takes a lot to get me up. Jesus and a bunch of therapists. And if you want to throw some pills in it, that's what gets me up. And maybe even normalizing mental health issues. Because I think as when we're going through a lot, I've started hearing, increased rates of Nigerian moms and wives just committing suicide. One just happened not too long ago. Just out of the blues. I mean, I don't say out of the blues just casually. She was probably going through a lot.
She was struggling.
But nobody around her knew. And now her little kids and her husband are left to pick up the pieces. But it shouldn't get to that level where people just have to, kill themselves. So I'm just saying this as a call out to women. Let's, start speaking up on these issues. Let's normalizing how it's not okay to be okay. We don't have to take the whole world, what's the word? The whole, what's what I'm trying to look for.
Carry the whole world on our shoulders.
Carry the whole world. Thank you, on my shoulder. I speak multiple languages, so sometimes I know the word in Korean. I'm like, I want to say it in Korean, but no, use English. So sometimes I lose words. Anyways, carry the whole world. We're not Sisyphus. We need to, normalize that it's okay not to be okay.
You know what, Mo? I think it's the fear of being judged. What I said earlier on, that I listened to your podcast and said, Mo has created a space where people can talk. I feel I've talked. You are validating. You're not questioning me. Oh, so what happened when you withdrew from the PhD? What did your family say? You didn't judge me. You didn't question me. But there's a lot of judgment in the choices that we as women make, because my choices and your choices are different. You've got your own story. I respect people's lived experiences more, because everyone's story makes sense to them. So your choices make sense to you. So we have been given a checklist of things to tick as an African woman. Okay, you have to do this at this stage in your life. You have to do it this way. And this is what happiness will look like for you. This is what being accepted in this society will look like for you. If you don't do this, you'll be stigmatized, you'll be maligned, you will actually be judged by your own fellow women who have bought into that. I call it a self-made prison. It
is.
So it's that fear of being judged. I mean, you have to talk about your experience as it appears to you. What does it mean to you? You don't have to worry that, I am not going to appear strong, but you have to express things as they impact on you.
That's all right, because it's the moment you stop living for the approval of others, that's the moment you start living. Because guess what? the people that you're using as standards, they have issues too. So they might not say it, so don't live your life for that. And even, with your PhD experience, as someone who works in a university and, I hold a PhD as well, I know it's not for everybody. As a matter of fact, I've counseled students who've eventually made the decision to leave PhD programs. I mean, I had one come into my office, which actually recommended to come talk to me. And by the time we're done, she was like, I don't think I want to do it anymore.
Yes.
So she got her master's. She's doing great now. She's working at a pharmaceutical firm. She has a family, and she's doing great. And she always goes back to say, thank you so much for speaking with me. So what's the use of judgment? If you've decided that this is not for you, what are some other paths that can be quite helpful? Yesterday, I still had another friend reach out to me. She told me about her PhD program. Where she was, they were super racist. And we decided that this is not the right place for you.
Yeah.
She tried and tried. Whatever she was doing was never enough for her supervisor. She left. She's gotten a job now. She's doing great.
Yeah.
She's doing
thriving.
Great. She's able to thriving. What does a PhD do in that? She could have stayed there and maybe just, eventually lost her soul. What's the point of it? So again, I think listening to people and knowing that what works for me might not work for you, but listen to it because you always know what the answers are. I always find that fascinating. I'm not teaching you what to do. It's just listening. And then you find that by just externally validating something, you're like, I'm going to make the decision to just quit. And that's okay. We should start normalizing quitting. I think that would do us a lot of good. Anyways, we're rounding off now, but I feel like there's still so much questions to be asked of you. So as a whole, women empowerment, which is what we've talked about. We've talked about talking about our stories. What do you think from a top-down approach? What strategies can African governments implement to promote, just awareness of women's health, especially when it comes to mental health, for the overall development of their countries? We've talked about how we're very integral to the society. We actually keep the bloodline going literally. Without women, generations will die off, in throes. How can African governments be well empowered? And I think Africa is quite unique because we have a growing young population. Look at countries like Asia, where they have very low birth rates and high the death rates. People are living longer, but they're not replacing the population fast enough. But countries like Burundi or even Botswana, where 60% of their population are less than 20, which is like a very healthy workforce. But then sometimes you find that women are quite marginalized. How can African countries step up the plate to really promote overall wellness in their women population?
That is a difficult one because you've used African governments. I understand we've got, different culture values, but I'll still try to narrow down in a very slightly general way. I think for me, it's adjusting our beliefs about what being a woman should look like. And I'll explain why. We have these traditional roles that I'm sure they were useful during the times of caveman or the Stone Age. Okay. But now we're in a different era. We've got, advances in science, in technology. So the idea should be to have human beings that contribute to the society in whatever shape, in whatever way they come. And it's acknowledging that women can also make a contribution, not to confine them, not to say this is what you're supposed to do or what you're supposed to look like. So it's allowing women into spaces that were predominantly male, giving them opportunities to thrive. And I don't know if it can even start from the top only, because most of the influences are family influences more.
True.
They're micro influences. It's your family, it's your immediate community. But I suppose just putting in policies, and we've already started seeing that. There are lots of scholarships now for women in science, women in technology, women in AI. So there are those efforts being made, and they're bearing fruit. We've also seen a lot of effort in curbing GBV, in making sure that there are policies that protect women, girls, and children. So I would say they are doing the most. They're doing, but they're not doing the most. There could be more efforts to make sure that we're pushing these policies to enable women, to empower women, to create spaces for women to thrive.
I like that, especially highlighting that it's not just a top-down approach, it's also at the grassroots level, the family, right? And so hopefully, that's going out into the space right there and doing some form of good. I have two final questions. For your practice, especially given just what you're doing in your hometown, home country of Malawi, how do you see it growing in the next 5 years? Or what's your hope or wish about it?
That's a good one, a difficult one. I think I would just like to see normalizing well-being. Because when you're in a situation or when you've lived with adversity for a long period of time, that becomes your default way of operating. In fact, you can be living in survival mode. Your body gets used to living in survival mode when we talk in terms of stress and trauma, because you're exposed to a lot of stress, a lot of trauma. You are used to being in a survival mode. And I firmly think that your thinking also becomes, survival mode thinking, where you can't think ahead, you can't plan. But I think we should normalize thinking in terms of well-being, that things can be different. You don't always have to respond to a crisis. You don't always have to respond to adversity. So we can normalize that by talking about well-being. How does well-being look like? How does being happy look like? How is having good emotional health like? So when we normalize that, then people can start seeking these spaces where they're getting the emotional health. So yes, as time goes by, the attention will be paid to mental health. People will value either going to talk to someone or talking to someone. And I think even in the professional space, there'll be a lot of investment in that area. As I mentioned, I'm an educator. I treat undergrad psychology students. Most of them do it as a degree, but they go on to do something else. I would really like to see them pursuing this further, just maybe opening their own psychosocial support centers. But I think there's a lot of room if people just acknowledge that it's all right. I have mental health. I can get down sometimes. I can feel sad, and I need to take care of this. And then that's how we can build this, because you can't build on something that you don't acknowledge.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Now, as we, especially, taking care of yourself first and then normalizing mental health, and even through your practices, your clinic work, and then you're teaching your students as well. So thank you for that. As we round off, I want to take you back to your country, Malawi. I imagine because of just, how landlocked you are, you have Zambia, I think, and then Tanzania, if I recall my geography right. But why should we visit Malawi? And if there's some highlights of Malawi you'd like to talk about, why should we visit it? Yeah.
You should visit Malawi because our currency has just devalued. So even if you carry $1, it will buy you a lot of things.
Oh my gosh,
No,
that's
seriously.
sad though, because I imagine that inflation is the same thing in my country. The dollar sneezes, we all catch COVID. That's
Seriously, it's a beautiful country, Mo. Where I live in the southern part of Malawi, Zomba, it's all green throughout the year, fresh air. We've got lots of fruits. I mean, real fruits. The mangoes here are so tasty. You've got avocado.
Really?
The food is fresh. The food is nice. The greens are nice. And it's really beautiful. It's raw. Most importantly, the people are so friendly. You will feel safe.
Yeah.
And yes, you will notice that this is a poor country, but the resilience really brushes off you.
Poor in what standards? I don't think it's poor. I mean, when we say poor, it's usually like an ethnocentric point of view. Like
Absolutely.
It's so rich in so much, rich in culture, rich in community. And
I would say Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. But we have challenges with infrastructure, services that are supposed to be good, like the education, health. So I would say poor in that sense. But yeah, I think we're rich in so many ways. We've got land. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of fresh food. So those are the reasons. But most importantly, there's Lake Malawi. We've got fresh fish, fresh chambo fish. We've got a variety of small fish. And we've got mountains. We've got one of the highest.
I want to try your teas. I want to try your teas. 'Cause you have, yeah. I know it's quite popular. Your tea and seafood, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a country to visit. And also just to really get a bigger picture of what the world is like. I mean, you're living in the US now from Nigeria. I think traveling to me is also part of one's education. You just don't get a PhD and say, I'm educated, but visiting other cultures, trying to adapt, trying to learn about those cultures is very much part of being an educated and exposed person.
I would love to visit. If you invite me, I would love to.
I will invite you.
Love to visit.
Just get a lot of dollars.
$1, right? $1 bills. I got a lot of $1 bills. Finally, it's 2-in-1 question. And what do you think about Nigerians? And it's okay. There's nothing I haven't heard said. I'm just always curious to know what other Africans think about Nigerians. And then the second part of that question is that as a Nigerian, or even other Malawians listen to this, what can we learn about Malawi from you?
Nigerians are very confident and sometimes even come across as overconfident because, you speak loudly. Your presence is felt in the room. All right. I love your art. I love the culture. The music is captivating. But also for you, you have to accept that for other people, confidence isn't always loud. Confidence isn't always aggressive. Confidence can be quiet. So for Malawians, a lot of people think that the quietness or the calmness is an expression of lack of confidence, but it's just our nature. I think we're really calm people and very tame. So it's just accepting that, because sometimes if you're around Malawians, it can easily look like you can walk all over them, but it's really just our nature. We're very just laid back, just chilled. So yeah, that's what you can learn about Malawians. But I've had one Nigerian friend. She wasn't loud. I thought she was very wise and very thoughtful. And you know what she told me? She told me that we're different cultures. And she said, I quote her, I come from the intellectual culture, the Chinua Achebes. And there are others who are popular for scams, internet scams. I'm not part of that. That's exactly what she said. But, every society, you've got your bad apples. I wouldn't be judgmental about that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And as always, I've learned a lot just about your resilience, but also the passion, which really shines through, and your intentionality. Because I imagine, like I said earlier on, moving from where you were and going back home was something you did very meaningfully. And I'm glad that everything has worked out for you. And that lesson in quitting doesn't necessarily mean that you failed at something. It's just a pivot in the road, and you can always find your path. And so that's what I would like to leave with the listeners today. Like, whatever your hands find to do, do it well. And if it means taking another approach or going left instead of turning right, that's okay. Remember, it's your life. At the end of the day, it's your life. When all is said and done, on that tombstone, it's going to be your only name on it. Mm-hmm. So live your life the best way you can. If there are so many pressures, if there are conversations to be had, or just plucking yourself away from those environments that are not helping you thrive, do that. And if you would like to maybe consider talking to a therapist or a professional to help almost like untangle and unravel that aspect of your life, I highly recommend talking to someone about it. All that is said, live your life without regrets and make sure that every decision you make is something you want to make for yourself, not because you feel pressured by it or you feel like you're going to be letting somebody down. All that said, I just want to say thank you so much, Michelle. I would love to bring you back. I want you to come back again. I feel like we have so much we haven't talked about. I would love to maybe do more stuff with you, workshops, or
I'm okay with
organize
that.
some form of retreats. I know, I could sense that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, there's so much we haven't explored, but we have to contain the podcast because it's just like, 40, 45 minutes long. But I just want to say thank you, like truly deeply from the bottom of my culturally nourished heart. I thank you for reaching out, and I thank you for coming on the podcast and just sharing of yourself. It really meant a lot.
No, you will help a lot of Malawian women because I will send it on my networks as well, and I know they'll be like, where was this podcast? This is what I wanted to hear. Your journey is very inspiring. No one talks about these things. It's literally suffering in silence. So I'll make sure that I get it out as much as I can.
What's a famous greeting in? I know you speak so many languages, but because in Nigeria I would say how far. What's a famous greeting in Malawian language?
Mulibwanji.
Mulibwanji. What does that mean?
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Mulibwanji.
And
and what language is that?
In Zambia they say Bwanji because we have the same dialect. So Mulibwanji. So how are you? Ndiri I'm fine.
I'm fine. Oh wow! Because I know you guys speak so many languages. I mean, English is top one, but you have your Chewa, I think
Yao,
Tonga,
Tonga, Sena. So you know your Malawi well, right?
A little bit. Because I know Tonga is also spoken across other African languages, African countries as well. Yeah. But anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's like 5 minutes we've been talking, but it's been an hour.
I know,
Email me more. I'm available. Whatever you need, let me know.
Oh, I found the kin spirit. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye for now.
Bye. Yeah, bye. All right, everyone. That was a podcast episode. We have a monthly club. We meet once a month where we just go over different topics. So we've explored sexuality. We've also explored motherhood and intergenerational trauma being passed. For this month, we're looking at personality tests. So we're looking at the Myers-Briggs, the 5 voices, and the ocean. If you'd like to join our club, we call it the More Sibling Club, TMC. Send us an email, and it's free of charge. We just find a community and we build that from there. Thank you all. I'm your host, More Sibyl. Love you guys, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.